as introduced. That's all we've got.
Yeah.
H128.
128, yeah.
All right, so Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. Yes, I'm here on H128 as introduced. So starting on page 2, the first sections is a finding section. There is a second finding section later, but this is related to the working lands business. So the General Assembly finds private and public forest lands constitute unique and irreplaceable resources, benefits, and values of statewide importance, contribute to the protection and conservation of wildlife habitat, air, water, and soil resources of the state, mitigate the effects of climate change, and benefit the general health and welfare of the persons of the state. The forest products industry is a major contributor to and is valuable to the state's economy by providing nearly 14,000 jobs for Vermonters, generating $2.1 billion in annual sales, and supporting $30.8 million in additional economic activity from trail uses and seasonal tourism. The forest products industry is essential to the manufacture of forest products that are used and enjoyed by the persons of the state and benefits the general welfare of the persons of the state. Private and public forest lands and forestry operations are adversely affected by the encroachment of urban, commercial, and residential land uses throughout the state that result in forest fragmentation and conversion and erode the health and sustainability of remaining forests. On to page 3. The encouragement, development, improvement, and preservation of forestry operations will result in extant, intact, and functioning forests that will provide a general benefit to the health and welfare of the persons of the state and the state's economy. To strengthen, promote, and protect the Vermont forest products industry, the state should modernize regulatory requirements for the forest products sector.
Yes.
I'm just curious about the format and the legal meaning of findings. Does that mean a study was conducted?
No. So generally, I advise findings are supposed to be factual statements that have a citation. Findings in legislation are supposed to support the legislation and express legislative intent related to the legislation should there ever be a legal challenge to it or an issue with interpretation. So generally, I advise clients that most of the time findings are not necessary. They're not necessarily supposed to support, reflect feelings or opinions on specific things. They're supposed to have a factual citation. So generally, if the legislature wants to make a statement about something that's more feelings or opinions based, we recommend that be in a floor report, and that statutory language should stand on its own without having to be justified. So this is probably contains some statements that don't have an exact citation for them. So if you're interested in working on this bill, you could potentially look at that.
Thank you.
Representative O'Brien.
I mean, just to add to that, things are immediately dated too, right? If you start putting in, they bring in this much money, then you're like, well, that was last year, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So my question was, is there a definition section? Because working lands, we talk about it all the time, but is working lands defined in statute?
I don't know off the top of my head. So another thing about bills, we call them reader assistance headings when there's those 3 stars around something, and those do not appear in the statutes anywhere. That's just to assist readers in knowing what the topic is when there's a bill that has multiple topics in it. So I don't know offhand if there's a working lands definition, but I was trying to differentiate between the parts of this bill.
Right. But because of the enterprise board and that initiative, it seems.
Oh, sure.
Here is sort of defined, right, as this sort of farming forestry universe.
Yeah, and I think the sponsor requested that and specifically be included in the title as well. So. All right, so on page 3, section 2 is a statutory provision. It amends 10 VSA 6093, which is the mitigation of prime ag soil section in Act 250. So the new language reads, wood products manufacturers, notwithstanding any provision of this chapter to the contrary, the conversion of primary agricultural soils by a wood products manufacturer shall be allowed to pay a mitigation fee computed according to the provisions of subdivision 1 of this subsection, except that it shall be entitled to a ratio of 1:1 protected acres to acres of affected primary agricultural soil. So wood products manufacturer is a defined term in Act 250. It was added last year in S 226. So first, wood product means logs, pulpwood, veneer wood, boltwood, wood chips, stud wood, poles, pilings, biomass, fuel wood, maple sap, and bark. And wood products manufactured means a manufacturer that aggregates wood products from forestry operations and adds value through processing or marketing in the wood product supply chain or directly to consumers through retail sales. Wood products manufacturers include sawmills, veneer mills, pulp mills, pellet mills, producers of firewood, wood chips, mulch, and fuel wood, and log and pulp concentration yards. Wood products manufactured does not include facilities that purchase, market, and resell finished goods, such as wood furniture, wood pellets, milled lumber, and milled lumber without first receiving wood products from forestry operations. So those are two definitions that are in Act 250 already in its definition section, which is 6001. And they were added last year in S 226 because currently they're used in Act 250 in regard to, there are special permit conditions established in Act 250 in regards to wood products manufacturers. So it's then using that term here to reduce the amount of mitigation that's required for primary agricultural soils. So Representative Sims did talk about this a little bit, but currently in the statute, if a site that is being considered for development as part of the Act 250 process has primary agricultural soils located on that site, there's a process by which they're supposed to be, any harm to those soils is supposed to be mitigated to protect them for future use, the potential future use in the future for agricultural purposes. So generally the default is supposed to be that the site plan itself is supposed to rearrange the site so that the least amount of soil is harmed as possible. But there is also this option about if that can't be done, paying the fee for offsite mitigation. So the ratio that's established, how much land needs to be conserved, the statute defaults to more land needs to be conserved than that is being destroyed, so that the loss of primary agricultural soil, so that they're being conserved at a greater rate than they're being destroyed. So currently the statute sets up a formula so that the ratio is between 2:1 and 3:1. And the ratio is the exact amount is dependent on the quality of agricultural soils. The soils are ranked from 1 to 7, 6 or 7. And then additional, so then with number 1 being most prime. Yeah, so it's 1 through 7. And so if a project was going to destroy or harm soils that had a value of 1, being, I guess, the most fertile, that is when it's a 3:1 ratio. The lowest soils, which are those between 5 and 7, that's 2:1 ratio. And then there is a price established for if there's going to be an offsite mitigation fee. There is a price established based on where in the state the parcel is located. And so what this language is doing is that it's lowering it to a 1:1. So it's lowering the amount that needs to be preserved either on the site or paying the mitigation fee. This is there's a lot of information in just this section. And so I can definitely attempt to answer questions. The Agency of Agriculture does work on this with the Natural Resources Board as part of the Act 250 process. And so if you start to have a lot of questions, I may need to suggest that you hear from them. So, but I can definitely start.
Good, yeah, no, I think, well, let's see what happens here. Let's try. Right.
I just, Representative Sims mentioned that there are other categories of development that are in the one-to-one ratio. I was just wondering if you can speak to that.
Yes. So currently, there is a very small subset of permanently affordable housing located in designated areas. I think they have, let me see, one-to-one as well. And so that's a slightly different definition than other housing, because that's pretty restrictive. And this is one thing I didn't look up before I got in here. And that, so yes, industrial parks is also one-to-one. And so I think those are the only two that have, yes, I think those are the only two that have special calculations.
Do you know when industrial parks?
It was. I think it. I think it was added in 2014, but I would need to double check to be certain.
Airports.
Mm-hmm.
We had a conversation last year about airports. Somebody's mentioned it this year too. They don't receive that exemption, or that one, they don't qualify for the one-to-one.
Correct.
Currently, they don't.
Currently, they don't.
Representative Lipsky.
What do, permanently affordable housing are one-to-one?
I believe.
Is that what you?
Yes. Let me double check if it's permanently affordable.
Or were there qualifications?
That is what I just said. I think there are some additional qualifications. So I don't think it's. So I don't know, and I could read this section alone is 5 pages. So I can get back to you if you would like that specific
I
information.
guess my question is more, were industrial parks so one-to-one?
Yes, industrial parks are one-to-one.
So because they're both in the public good, I just considered them of very different valuation or contribution to society or sustainability of.
Sure. So I think that these things are policy choices that were made specifically by the legislature. I think they were made at different times. So 2014, I can speculate slightly. So 2014 was right before I started. And I remember that there was a big industrial park bill. There was a push. So there were a couple other provisions in statute that were added. Yeah. Yeah.
I skipped, I'm sorry, Representative Councilman.
So this is maybe a little vague, but I'm curious to know when a property that is deemed agricultural, say prime agricultural soils, is, they've paid the fees, they've been given the okay, the location is sorted out, they're going to commence with building. In site preparation, the contractor often scrapes soil. Are those spoils then relocated? I mean, there's a value of that soil that can be relocated. I wonder if in the law that's addressed at all.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not certain though.
The assumption is that you're just building on the land and it's permanently encased in concrete and that's it.
I think so. I don't know if there are ever certain provisions that are added to permit conditions describing that. I don't know specifically.
Thank you.
Representative O'Brien?
So, Ellen, can you just walk us through the process of mitigation? As in, there's fees assessed, right, for your whatever ratio, and then that money goes to VHCD, which then working with like Vermont Land Trust essentially pays, say, a farm to conserve a certain amount of land?
Yes, I think that's probably almost exactly it. Yeah, so they purchase and then conserve land. And I think it's supposed to be of similar quality as to what was being lost.
And it's previously unconserved land, right?
Yes.
I was just thinking, I
Yeah.
mean, the irony of the situation, say a farmer puts in a sawmill on their land, has to go through Act 250, right? For 3 acres, doesn't have a conserved farm, the HCB conserves 3 of those farm acres, I guess, or 9, or whatever it would be, potentially on the same farm, pays the money to conserve it.
Oh, so no. So, okay, so the first question is, so there's a default for, if a project is located in a designated area, then they can pay the offsite mitigation fee, which is given to VHCB, and they then conserve soils located elsewhere. For other projects, the default is that they have to conserve or mitigate on their own site.
Right.
And so it may involve that they themselves are conserving a part of the parcel to protect those soils for future use. But so no, VHCB wouldn't be paying the same applicant for their property. If VHCB is getting a mitigation fee, it would be purchasing property elsewhere.
I'm just saying, could there be a situation where another part of that farmer's farm, gets conserved by the VHCB? If it hadn't been conserved. Because usually it's developers, right?
I don't think so, but
They don't really have that decision, right? It would really be up to VHCB where they conserve that.
right. So if the farmer has property that is prime agricultural soil and they decide to mitigate on their own property, I'm going to stop because I think I'm getting confused. I'm confused. I'm going to stop, and I think you should get someone else answer that question.
Okay.
Potentially the Agency of Agriculture or VHCB, because
Who ends up with the money then? Like,
what money?
that VHCB gets in fees,
Uh-huh.
and then they're conserving land. Would it be the landowner, or is it?
Yes, they would be purchasing land to be conserved.
From whatever, right, fair market down to like permanently agricultural land, they might get paid. So it would flow through potentially to the land trust to, say, a farmer.
Yes.
Okay.
You should hear from them if you'd like details on how they do that.
Yeah.
Just made a note to have Laura invite whoever the appropriate person is from the agency and VHCB and or VHCB to come in and help us better understand that. Yeah.
Right, because that came up a lot during this Franklin County Airport, which was about the Franklin County Field Day.
Yeah. Right. That's where we had heard it earlier this year. Yeah. Okay. So I know you said you might not be able to answer all the questions on this particular topic. Seeing no other questions, if you want to move on to the next section.
Okay, so on page 4, section 3, so this is the exemption section of Act 250. And so on page 4, it's adding language that reads, no permit or permit amendment shall be required for either a sawmill that produces 3.5 million board feet or less annually, or an operation that involves the primary processing of forest products of commercial value that annually produces 3,500 cords or less of firewood or cordwood, or 10,000 tons or less of boltwood, whole tree chips, or wood pellets. And so I think, as Representative Sims already mentioned, currently those, I think, same businesses are, have a provision in Act 250 that gives them the ability to do a minor permit, which is a process as opposed to a major permit that does not necessarily require there to be a hearing, and those are generally issued quickly. Yes, so it's both, it's the same language that currently allows them to have a minor permit as opposed to a major permit. And so this would be exempting them fully.
So currently they are treated somewhat differently. Maybe we're not all sure exactly how differently. This new language would take that same group currently defined, using these particular numbers and say, be complete, it won't be required at all.
Yes.
Representative Rice.
Can minor permits have the kinds of things attached to it, like hours of operation or number of cars coming in and out? Like, are those kinds of things already being placed on businesses of this size?
Yeah, so so that's another issue. So first, yes, permit conditions can still be attached to minor permit applications. They generally, however, to be a minor application, there is a presumption that the application doesn't raise significant issues. And so I don't know if that has resulted in less permit conditions on them, but that's part of the designation of a minor permit. Additionally, in last year's S226, language was added that puts limits on permit conditions for wood products manufacturers.
Of all sizes.
Of all sizes.
And would this render moot any existing permits, like for a sawmill that's under this size that already has a permit that might have permit conditions that's been operating under? If this were passed, would that permit no longer exist, or the need for that permit?
So the permit would still exist. They would not be required to get any permit amendments if they made any additional changes to their business.
But it wouldn't say if there's a permit that includes hours of operation restrictions, they would still be required to
Yes,
follow that, even though a new sawmill operating next door wouldn't be required to get a permit at all.
yes. So it's an interesting question. I'm wondering,
You always
I-
dump them.
I don't know. I'm hesitant because I suspect I might be actually wrong. Because I haven't necessarily drafted any amendments that have passed, or amendments that have passed to make something fully exempt before. I don't know if the NRB still enforces against a permit with permit conditions. I don't know that off the top of my head.
I just asked
Is that, yeah, go ahead.
do minor permits still, you gave us that tutorial on Act 250, that there's certain criteria, right? You have to meet.
Yeah.
True with minor permits too?
Yes.
If we wanted to know more about what exactly a minor permit application process entailed, who would we?
The NRB,
Okay.
yeah.
Representative Lipsky.
This committee received testimony close to 2 months ago from some entrepreneurs under the working lands. And one of them was a very impressive entrepreneur who had both pork production, I think it's Madison County, but also a firewood wholesale operation, large. And 3,000 or 3,500 cords is no small operation, but that reaching, he was aspiring to do 10,000 cords a year soon. And so we could reach out to them to sort of get, was part of an existing farm operation, did they need to get an Act 250 permit? That's a large operation.
Good.
That might be a resource we could get some clarity on.
Just a language question here, wood products versus forest products. You went through a list of, I think you said wood products in the previous section.
Yes. So I know I circled that. I don't remember off the top of my head if forest products is also defined. I don't know if it's defined.
We will treat it as intending to mean the same thing, though. Is that
Seems synonymous.
Yes. Yeah. And this, in drafting this, I lifted the previously existing language that's already in the statute. So, yes, I can look into that.
okay? All right.
So the next section is on page 4. It's another finding section. Oh, I'm sorry. Section 4 repeals the language I was just referencing, which is the minor permit language. And then section 5 is the other finding section. So the General Assembly finds Vermont agriculture is critical to the state's heritage, local food supply, economy, rural communities, environment, tourism, and future. Food is essential, and Vermont either grows and produces its food locally or imports it at significant environmental costs. The COVID-19 pandemic further emphasized the importance of our local food supply. Vermont is rapidly, onto page 5, Vermont is rapidly losing dairy farms, productive farmland, and experienced farmers. New opportunities to keep farmland active exist. The farms that sell agricultural products directly to consumers host farm-based events that draw visitors and Vermonters to their farms and products, or provide authentic agritourism experiences, can diversify and prosper. These farm activities can also help attract new Vermonters, retain young Vermonters, entice new farmers, and develop vibrant rural communities with viable economic opportunities. To strengthen, promote, and protect Vermont's agriculture, the state should modernize regulatory requirements. So section 6 amends 24 VSA 441211, which is the language regarding accessory on-farm businesses. And to remind you, this is language that is exclusive here to municipal zoning. And so this statute, I can't remember if I've already been in this committee to talk about, or if that was last year.
Long enough ago
Yes.
that we could use a refresher. I think you may have gone over.
There's like weird deja vu on that.
So I'll walk through the language, but the concept of accessory on-farm business was created by this committee in 2018. And it says that municipalities can't prohibit accessory on-farm businesses. So already municipalities are prohibited from regulating farming itself. Act 250 also is, farming is exempt from Act 250. But this added that towns couldn't prohibit accessory on-farm businesses. And so there are 2 categories of what those businesses could entail. It's the storage, preparation, processing, and sale of qualifying products. And I'll read you the details in a moment. And then the other one are social, recreational, and educational events. And so within those limits, the town cannot prohibit the accessory on-farm business. They can do site plan review, which looks at traffic, noise, lighting, or traffic, lighting, parking. So I'll get to that in a minute, but this is not part of Act 250 currently. So on page 5, accessory on-farm businesses, no bylaw shall have the effect of prohibiting an accessory on-farm business at the same location as a farm. As used in the subdivision 11, accessory on-farm business means activity on a farm that compromises one or both of the following: the storage, preparation, processing, and sale of qualifying products, provided that more than 50% of the total annual sales or total annual number of sold products are from qualifying products that are produced on the farm where the business is located. On to page 6, educational, recreational, or social events or farm stays that feature agricultural practices or qualifying products or both. The language that's being struck here is moved down. So we'll talk about that more in a minute. So aggregator of farm products means a person who buys or collates qualifying products directly from the farm that grows or produces them and sells or distributes those qualifying products to an accessory on-farm business. Educational, recreational, or social events may include tours of the farm, farm stays, tastings and meals featuring qualifying products, and classes or exhibits in the preparation, processing, or harvesting of qualifying products. So that language there in subdivision 3, little I, was the language that was above that's being struck. So it's just been moved. And farm stay was also already in that definition, but it's been moved up farther as well. So then farm means a parcel or parcels owned, leased, or managed by a person devoted primarily to farming and subject to the RAP rules. For leased parcels to be part of a farm, the lessee must exercise control over the lands to the extent that they would be considered as part of the lessee's own farm. Indicators of such control can include whether the lessee makes day-to-day decisions concerning the cultivation or other farming related use of the leased lands, and whether the lessee manages the land for farming during the lease period. Farm has the same meaning as Act 250.
Representative O'Brien, go ahead.
I just, back to Act 250 a second, what triggers it? You know, we went to Fairmont Farm, they have a camp. So say they have, you know, farm stays, farm education, all the kids are staying in tents. Does that, you know, it's an farm accessory business. Does that trigger Act 250, or does dirt really have to be, you know, just dirt to trigger Act 250?
The Act 250 is triggered by the construction of improvements, which is any physical change to the site. So depending on the exact situation, it probably triggered Act 250, but I can't say for certain.
And then when we have Steve here, things like Sugar House,
Farming.
doesn't trigger Act 250.
Correct.
You mentioned maple sap, so if I build a structure to house a bulk tank from pipelines, that is forestry and potentially would trigger Act 250.
So I'm going to pass.
That's why Steve's here.
So sap is included in the definition of a wood product, but it is also part of the definition of farming, and processing of maple sap is also part of farming.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that maple sap is used in wood product when it is being processed at a different facility than where it was collected. I am not 100% on that one, but it's where I'm going to land.
Fair enough. Representative Lipsey.
Just to Representative O'Brien's point, every sugar house has a storage bag, whether it's a tanker truck or white plastic 250-gallon things. You've got to store it somewhere. When it's flowing, and when it gets below freezing, it stops. So the logic would tell me storage of maple sap is part of a sugar house operation or sugaring operation and wouldn't be treated differently. An example of sap that's not relevant is the turpentine industry, which is not practiced in Vermont, but longleaf pine was a big source of that product, and that's not happening in this particular region. So, but sap is what makes syrup. It's got to be there next to the sugar house or gravity proximity. Can't separate it from sugar.
Yeah. The argument between forest and ag has been a long-time argument as to whether sap is forest or maybe is ag.
Right.
And so far, we've been able to keep sap as ag. But you mentioned it in statute, or was it in this?
Yeah, so it is.
Wood products.
It's under the definition of wood product. And that definition is then used as part of wood products manufacturer. So I think it's denoting that when maple sap is received from a farm and then sent to a business that's going to process it, that's not on the farm, that's when it's a product, I think.
Okay, so we are, I want to note that we're closing in on 12, and I don't want to keep anybody here too much longer than 12. We might not finish walking through the bill. We might have to have Ellen come back, but let's keep going then. We're still looking at definitions. Where are we? I've been scrolling around, Ellen, I'm sorry. Can you bring us back?
Yeah, so I was reading the definition of farming. So on page 7, farming has the same definition in 10 VSA 6001, which is the Act 250 definition. And that is the definition that is cited throughout most other statutes as well. And that's not changing, it's just changing the number. Farm stay means a paid overnight guest accommodation on a farm for the purpose of participating in educational, recreational, or social activities on the farm. A farm stay includes the option for guests to participate in those activities.
This definition hasn't existed up till now, farm stay definition.
So it did. It's actually it's the language that was struck on page 6.
Got it.
I don't remember off the top of my head if it has made any. I think there is a slight change here in that it no longer references featuring agricultural practices or products. But that language is above, so maybe that's why.
Okay.
So to feature agricultural practices or qualifying products means a host farm's agricultural practices or its qualifying products are a substantial component of any educational, recreational, or social event that the accessory on-farm business hosts. For social or recreational events like weddings or concerts that may have a purpose wholly independent of the host farm's activities, agricultural practices or qualifying products must be an integral component to the event to satisfy the definition of an accessory on-farm business. A farm that is exclusively serving an event location is not featuring agricultural practices or qualifying products. So in the statute currently, there is this phrase, that in order to hold for the holding of events to be an accessory on-farm business, they need to feature agricultural practices or qualifying products. And this is adding a definition for that because there wasn't one specifically. So I think it is largely within the intent of the way the language currently reads. So it's reflecting, I think, conversations that have happened in this committee before, which is that a farm serving as a location, exclusively as a location, that is not something that this statute was trying to originally protect. But if events are being held and they do have the food or the agricultural practices as part of the integral part of the event, then that could meet the definition. So then qualifying product means a product grown or produced on the farm where the accessory on-farm business is located or purchased directly from another farm or an aggregator of farm products. So I'm going to stop there quickly. I think this concept of aggregator of farm products is one of the big changes in this section. Because currently it is required under the statute that the majority of the products sold in this accessory on-farm business have to come from that farm where the business is located. And this is allowing purchase from an aggregator of farm products who may gather those from multiple different farms. So the product is wholly agricultural, horticultural, viticultural, or dairy commodity or maple syrup, livestock or cultured fish or a product thereof, a product of poultry, bees, an orchard or farm crops, fiber crops, a commodity otherwise grown or raised on a farm, a product manufactured on one or more farms from commodity wholly grown or raised on one or more farms, or a product that names, describes, or promotes the farm or accessory on-farm business, including merchandise or apparel that features the farm or accessory on-farm business. So this is another change. So previously, an accessory on-farm business needs to sell a majority of the products need to be something that was grown or produced on that farm. This is now extending that the majority of products can be something that was grown or raised or merchandise or apparel. Next is the RAP rules, means the rules on required agricultural practices adopted pursuant to 6 VSA Chapter 215, Subchapter 2. So then eligibility for an accessory on-farm business to be eligible for the benefit of being protected from prohibition by a town. The business shall comply with each of the following. The business is operated by a farm owner with one or more persons residing on the farm parcel or the lessee of a portion of the farm. The farm meets the threshold criteria for the applicability of the RAP rules as set forth in those rules. Okay, so that's just two. So they need to be operated or owned by the farmer, and then it has to be a farm that meets the RAP rules, so large enough that it falls under the RAPs. On page 9, so there aren't any changes in this section. So I'll go through them a little more quickly. So an accessory on-farm business can be in a new building or an existing building. It allows the town to do site plan review of the accessory on-farm business. So the town can't prohibit it, but they can do site plan review of it. Additionally, the towns can be less restrictive than this existing provision. So that at least partially means that they don't even have to require site plan review if they don't want to. And then the last provision requires that the Secretary of Agriculture, Food and Markets provides notification and training in relation to this law. So this is it's making a couple of changes to the accessory on-farm business statute itself. So what could qualify as an accessory on-farm business. So it's broadening it to allow products from multiple farms. And then it's also changing that merchandise and apparel count towards the requirement. So the next section is section 7, the language of which is on page 10. So this is amending Act 250. And what it's doing is adding the operation of an accessory on-farm business based on that statute I just read to the definition of farming, which means that it would be exempt from Act 250. So I just want to point out that what that means is that farming is being defined as operating a business, an accessory on-farm business. So in order to have an accessory on-farm business, you need to be farming. But now the definition of farming is including operating an accessory on-farm business.
Circular.
So I have concern that that could not require that anything being actually, and you're adding that apparel and merchandise count as a product. So I think arguably if you were to pass this language, it would not require there to be any growing or raising. Now, the farm still needs to have met the WRAP rules, but it is creating a bit of a circle here.
Okay, noted.
It's then adding 2 additional definitions to Act 250. The definition of principally produced, which I do believe is currently in the Act 250 rules. So it's adding it to the statute now. So principally produced means for the purposes of subdivision 22E, which is the definition of farming, that more than 50% of raw agricultural commodity or other agricultural product is grown or produced on the farm. The majority percentage shall be determined over a consistent and reasonably defined time period. The percentage of raw agricultural commodity grown or produced on the farm shall be determined by measuring the commodity's volume or weight. The percentage of an agricultural product grown or produced on the farm shall be determined by measuring the volume or weight of the product, ingredients, or materials, excluding water. So that is one of the changes in this definition, is that currently there is case law that water is part of the ingredients of a product. And so I think we may have discussed this before, but what that largely relates to is the beverages where the majority of the beverage is actually made from water. The last definition added there is agricultural products, which means raw agricultural commodities or processed or manufactured agricultural products. So then the last section of the bill is the section 248 language. So it is adding to Act 250 what is currently covered by 30 VSA section 248. Which is the construction of electric generation facilities greater than 500 kilowatt capacity. So currently, those electric generation facilities are exempt from Act 250 because they go through a separate and very similar process of Section 248. So Section 248 encompasses nearly all of the Act 250 criteria directly by cross-reference. It does include the mitigation of primary agricultural soils. So if you're considering working on this language, I would just point out that both permits require most of the same criteria to be addressed. There are some additional criteria under 248 that are different than Act 250, and Act 250 has a few other criteria that are different than 248, but most of the criteria are the same.
Well, good, we got through it.
Hold on.
And I'm going to suggest that we not bring up any questions right now, but write them down, hold them. We'll have Ellen come back in to answer any questions that we have right now or that might occur to us in the meantime. Won't be today. All right, well, thank you then. That's all. We'll just stop there. Thanks very much.